"This spot is for the disabled, sir." Chloe's voice cracked through the thick air of the parking lot like a whip. The man, standing beside a shiny black car, a model far too expensive for that neighborhood Walmart, looked up from his phone, surprised. He wore a blazer, dress pants, and a watch that alone could cover her rent for months, and he didn't seem to understand what he'd done wrong. "I said this spot is for wheelchair users," she repeated, her hand firmly gripping the passenger door handle, where her mother, a gentle-faced woman with fair skin and eyes permanently closed by blindness, waited patiently in her wheelchair. I didn't know," the man began, still confused. "You knew. There's a giant sign painted on the ground and another one on the wall. You just don't care, do you? You probably think money buys respect, too." He took a step back. Not because he felt threatened, but because he didn't seem to know how to react. That woman, young dark brown hair tied in a messy bun, worn-out hoodie, exhausted expression, was speaking to him like he was just anybody, like he wasn't who he was. "My mum just got out of the hospital. She's blind, has diabetic neuropathy, and can barely walk, and I still have to rush out here to buy food because we've got nothing at home. And you? You're too busy on your phone to see where you're parking?" The silence around them thickened. A few people had stopped to watch. The man, tense, opened his mouth but said nothing. He just lowered his head, walked over to his car, and moved it to a spot farther away. Chloe huffed, opened the door with effort, unfolded the wheelchair, and with a care shaped by exhaustion, helped her mother out. "It's okay, sweetheart," the woman murmured in a soft voice. Her name was Rose, and even though she couldn't see, she felt everything. "It's not, Mom. But it will be." Inside Walmart, Chloe moved quickly but quietly. She grabbed the basics, rice, eggs, instant coffee, and checked her watch every 2 minutes. Her interview was the next morning. Any mishap could ruin everything. They got home 30 minutes later, an old 3-story building with no elevator. Chloe parked Rose's chair at the first step, carried the bags up to the 3rd floor, then came back down and slowly helped her mother up. One leg at a time. 3 flights. A world of exhaustion in just a few feet. The apartment was tiny. A cramped studio with scratched hardwood floors, an old ceiling fan, and a single window facing a peeling wall. Dishes were stacked on the sink. Medication sat on top of the fridge. Rose went straight to the armchair by the window. Chloe silently put the groceries away. Then she opened a drawer locked with a plastic key and pulled out an old folder filled with hospital bills. She looked at the balance due, sighed, and in the silence, her phone pinged. A reminder. Interview. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Chloe closed her eyes for a second, then walked over to the makeshift mattress on the floor, opened her laptop, its cover plastered with video game stickers, and started the game like someone lighting a candle in a dark room. She was good at this, and for a few minutes, she managed to forget the world was falling apart. Wearing oversized headphones that swallowed her ears, Chloe played isolated from reality, as if she'd entered another dimension. Her fingers moved with near-surgical precision, clicking, dragging, typing commands, with the ease of someone who does this daily, not out of obligation, but out of a desperate need to breathe. The keyboard responded like a loyal old friend. Every movement felt natural, almost instinctive, like a dance only she knew the steps to. On the low table beside her, a mug of cold coffee long forgotten. 3 sips and an entire night ahead. Next to the mug, a notepad with scribbled strategies, codes, calculations. Things she studied alone in the dead of night, dreaming of the day she'd stop delivering food and start working in the field she truly loved, technology. On screen, the game played on. She was a born competitor, even without the best gear or a stable internet connection. The Wi-Fi cut out sometimes. The laptop froze occasionally. But she kept going. It was never about winning, it was about enduring, about not drowning. In the corner of the screen, her image appeared in a small box. Camera on, framed with stacked books behind her, a sheet hanging to serve as a backdrop. Her dark brown hair was now loose, slightly wavy. Her face looked tired, with under-eye circles no concealer could hide. But her eyes, even half closed, held an intensity that drew attention. A quiet strength. like someone who had been knocked down too many times and had learned to stand on scraped knees. She wasn't the kind of girl who waited to be rescued or dreamed of fairy tale endings. Chloe was made of survival, of improvisation, of figuring things out with what she had. The kind of woman who knows you can't pause the world. You either play or you get played. When the game ended, she closed the laptop slowly, like finishing a chapter only she would ever read. She took a deep breath, pressed her palms to the floor and stood up slowly. Her back ached. Her feet were cold. But there was still more to do. She walked over to the bed where her mother slept, her steady breathing filling the quiet room. Chloe pulled a light sheet over her, adjusted the pillow under her head and turned off the light with a gentle flick. Darkness filled the space, except for a sliver of light sneaking in through the broken blinds. In the shadows, Chloe returned to her corner. She sat cross-legged on the floor, leaning against the rough wall. She stared at the ceiling for a while. Her eyes had adjusted to the dark, but her mind was still spinning. The man from the parking lot. It wasn't just the scene. It was the way he looked at her, the way he stood still. There was no anger, no arrogance, just that uncomfortable silence of someone who isn't used to being called out. A look that seemed to ask something, or maybe hide something. "Who the hell was that jerk?" she muttered, more to herself than to her sleeping mother. But the question lingered, and for the first time in days, she wasn't thinking about bills or the fear of tomorrow. She was thinking about him, and the strange feeling that it hadn't just been a fight over a parking spot. Far from there, in a sleek apartment high above Manhattan, Brian Holt slowly poured a glass of expensive whiskey into a low crystal tumbler. The ice cracked as it met the amber liquid, but he didn't notice the sound. His eyes were fixed on the lights of the East River, where the reflection of buildings trembled in the breeze. The city stretched out before him in all its splendor, a concrete jungle that had always obeyed him. But tonight, he didn't feel in control of anything. Sitting in the balcony armchair, still wearing his dress shirt from the day, sleeves unbuttoned, hair tousled by the wind, Brian wasn't thinking about meetings or shareholders, not about profits or acquisitions. He was thinking about her, the girl in the faded hoodie with fire in her eyes that cut through him like a blade. Chloe. Brian Holt, CEO of H-Tech, 36 years old, respected, admired, feared. A man with a commanding presence, sharp jawline and piercing gaze, the kind who fills a room without saying a word. He was used to being in control, to leading, to being heard. Ever since his parents died in a plane crash, he'd carried the world on his shoulders and never once complained. He inherited a fortune, a company, a legacy. But he also inherited silence, the kind of loneliness even applause can't drown. No one challenged him anymore. No one said what they really thought. Everyone around him, employees, board members, even childhood friends, had become mirrors reflecting only what he wanted to see. No friction, no truth, just comfort. And he knew, too much comfort was the beginning of stagnation. But today, in the parking lot of some random Walmart, a woman he'd never seen in his life yelled at him like she was tired of carrying the world. And maybe she was. There was pain in her voice. But there was courage, too. She didn't apologize. She didn't care about the expensive car, the flashy watch, none of it. She saw an injustice and acted. He stood frozen, unable to respond, and that paralysis hurt more than he cared to admit. He took a sip of the whiskey. The burn slid down his throat, but it wasn't enough to erase the memory. Her yelling, pushing her mother's wheelchair in a rush, then disappearing between the cars like a storm. And for some reason he couldn't explain, it got to him. Yes, he'd been humiliated. But that wasn't what bothered him. It was that she saw him, really saw him, not the CEO, not the rich guy, just a human being who'd made a mistake. A random man in a big car, parked in the wrong space, and there was beauty in that. Brian leaned his head back against the chair, his tired eyes tracing the sky. He tried to push the thought away, but she kept coming back, with that wrinkled hoodie, that steady voice, and that look, intense, furious, real. The kind of look he hadn't seen since he was a kid, the kind of look his mother never had, that his business partners never will. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he'd never see her again. But something inside him whispered that fate wasn't done with this story yet. He finished the last sip, set the glass down on the glass table and sat there unmoving, staring out at the city that always applauded him, now silent. Meanwhile, across the city, in a modest apartment where the kitchen light still peeked through a crack in the door, Chloe slept beside her mother, exhausted, unaware that the man she just taught a lesson in empathy would just hours later be the same man sitting across from her, with the power to say yes or no. The H-Tech waiting room was cold, modern and silent. Chloe pressed her knees together, her sweaty hands gripping the strap of her bag too tightly. She wore the only dress shirt she owned, a pair of dark jeans, and clean but very worn sneakers. Her hair was tied in a makeshift ponytail, trying to look more professional than exhausted. Her eyes scanned the room with curiosity. Digital screens on the walls, employees with shiny badges, expensive coffee cups in hand. The kind of place that felt designed for a different kind of person. But she was there, with her heart pounding in her chest, an empty stomach, and shoulders weighed down by years of accumulated fatigue. She was there because she needed to be, because she was good at what she did, because she deserved a chance, and because maybe, just maybe, this was the last one before giving up on dreaming. A well-dressed woman stepped through the glass door. Name tag, Stephanie. She had a flawless bun, understated makeup and a clipboard in hand. Chloe Ramirez. Chloe stood up so fast her bag almost slipped off her shoulder. She smiled, tense, and followed the woman through the wide hallways of the company, where everything smelled of productivity and expensive carpets. Stephanie opened a double door. "Right this way. He'll be with you shortly." She walked in and froze. The office was large with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that looked like something out of a movie. In the center, a glass desk. Behind it, standing and looking at a laptop screen, was the same man from the parking lot. He looked up. She froze. So did he. For a second, time seemed to stop. No sound, no movement. Just two faces stunned by an impossible coincidence. Chloe, unable to hide her shock. Brian, with a faint gasp of surprise on his lips. She thought about running, about saying there'd been a mistake, but there was no time. He closed the laptop slowly, pulled out the chair, and gestured toward the seat across from him. "Have a seat," he said, his tone neutral, almost too calm. She obeyed. Her hands trembled. Her heart felt like it had stopped halfway up her throat. She took a deep breath, tried to remember what she had rehearsed, but no words came. "Well," she began after a few awkward seconds, "at least you parked correctly today, right?" He stared at her for 2 seconds, then let out an unexpected laugh. Genuine, and for a moment, the tension in the air dissolved. "I really gave you hell yesterday, huh?" she ventured, unsure if she should. "A little," he replied, still smiling. "But I think I needed that." Chloe blinked, confused. She'd expected disdain, retaliation, arrogance. But he seemed different, almost relieved, like he was glad to see her again, even under these circumstances. "Shall we begin?" he said, pulling a file toward him. She nodded, and in the minutes that followed, she found herself answering questions about operating systems, programming languages, personal projects. She talked about the videos she made online, the mods she built on her own, how she learned from YouTube between delivery shifts. She spoke quickly, her eyes lit up, as if, in that moment, she felt alive again. Brian listened closely. Truly. It wasn't just what she said. It was the spark in her eyes, the posture, the courage to be authentic, even there in front of a stranger who held the power to change everything. He remembered her tone of voice from the night before, how she stood up to him without fear. And now that same strength was there again, but lighter, freer. When the interview ended, there was a brief silence. Chloe bit her lip, uneasy. "Look," she began, "if this was awkward for you, I'm sorry. I had no idea who you were. And that's exactly why I want to hire you," he said before she could finish. Her eyes widened. What? You were honest, direct, and from what I've seen here, you're qualified. And you need this more than anyone else who walked into this room today. Chloe felt a lump in her throat, but she didn't let it show. She smiled, unsure. Are you serious? Very serious. You start Monday. Stephanie will send you everything. She nodded, still in shock, stood up, thanked him, and left as if walking on a floor that might vanish beneath her feet at any moment. In the waiting room, she sat on the bench for a few seconds, took a deep breath, then grabbed her phone and called her mum. Mum, you won't believe what just happened. In the background, Rose's soft, raspy voice sounded hopeful. How'd the interview go? I did great, and I met the guy I yelled at in the parking lot yesterday. He's the CEO, Mum. The CEO. Rose let out an incredulous laugh. And he hired you? He hired me. Chloe started laughing too, laughing loud, nervous, scared, relieved. It was the laugh of someone hanging by a thread, but still holding on. Before hanging up, she heard her mother say, I told you, God doesn't write straight with our crooked lines. He just waits for us to have the courage to walk, even when we can't see the path. Chloe went quiet for a moment, then murmured, Monday. I start Monday. And in that very moment, as she still sat there, a notification popped up on her phone screen. New delivery available. Accept? She glanced to the side, sighed, pressed the button. Life didn't stop, not even when everything was starting to change. Her backpack was on, helmet on her arm, and the app open on her phone as Chloe descended the 3 flights of stairs in her building, dodging a neighbor's bike and the remnants of an abandoned couch in the hallway. The laughter from the interview still echoed in her mind, but she knew she had to stay grounded. Every delivery meant a little more food on the table, and now, maybe, the beginning of the end of that routine. Night fell quickly. The Brooklyn sky took on bluish tones mixed with neon lights and distant horns. She pedaled skillfully between cars, dodging potholes, nodding greetings to doormen. In her backpack, an order of sandwiches and soda. In her earbuds, an instrumental playlist that kept her focused. Along the route, her mind kept drifting like a badly edited film to Brian's expression at the end of the interview. There was no arrogance, no air of superiority like she expected. There was a calm, almost uncomfortable, like he had recognized something in her or in himself, and that unsettled her. Why would he hire her, of all people, after what happened? You need this more than anyone else who came through that door today, his words echoed. Chloe felt proud but also a lingering doubt. What did he know? What had he imagined? Had he looked up her record before? It didn't matter. The job was hers, and she'd make it count. She delivered the order, confirmed the receipt, and rode home slowly, more tired than anything else. She climbed the stairs with her body aching, her mind foggy, but a small smile still on her lips. For the first time in a long while, there was something inside her that felt like hope. When she got home, Rose was sitting in the armchair, a blanket on her knees, the TV playing quietly. I took another delivery, Chloe said, taking off her helmet. I couldn't help it. It's going to be hard getting used to this set schedule thing. One thing at a time, sweetheart. You don't have to carry the world in a single day. Chloe sat beside her mother, rested her head against the armchair, and closed her eyes for a few seconds. Mom, he's handsome. Rose raised an eyebrow. The CEO, Chloe laughed. Ridiculously handsome, like one of those movie guys, but more, I don't know, reserved, serious, but with sad eyes. I can't explain it. Rose smiled softly, like someone reading a book before the final chapter. Sad eyes can recognize other pain, sweetheart. Nothing, forget it. Just be careful not to confuse kindness with salvation. Chloe stayed quiet for a moment, then got up, went to her room, and collapsed onto the bed with her phone in hand. She spent the night watching old videos about H-Tech, trying to learn more about the company, and about him. Brian Holt, 36 years old, private, off the grid, orphaned in his early 20s. Parents died in a plane crash. Took over the company young, loved by investors but distant from the press. Almost no public appearances, No scandals, no controversies, but also no smiles. She closed the browser. It was too early to imagine anything. On Monday, Chloe arrived early, very early. The company uniform still felt strange on her body. The shoes pinched her feet. But she was ready. Stephanie welcomed her, introduced her to the team, the workspace, and the tools. The environment was stimulating. People from all walks of life, modern computers, whiteboards filled with code, and capsule coffee machines on every floor. Mid-morning, while jotting down instructions and trying to memorize passwords and logins, she saw Brian walk down the hallway. He didn't stop, but looked her way. 1 second, a small nod, and kept walking. Chloe felt her heart race. "Careful, Ramirez," she whispered to herself. "You're here to work, not to mix things up." But the world seemed a little less gray that day, and that was already something. At lunch, she sat alone in the cafeteria, watching everything. People laughing, talking about shows, sharing desserts. She, with her homemade sandwich, took small bites between thoughts. When she got back to her desk, there was a yellow post-it stuck to her monitor. "First day was tough but promising. Keep it up." B. She smiled, and for a few minutes forgot about bills, doctors, staircases with no elevator, or sleepless nights. It was only the first day. But something inside her said this was the start of a new game. And she knew how to play. The following days passed like a whirlwind. Chloe threw herself into her new job with a near-desperate intensity. She arrived before everyone else left after them. She learned everything she could, asked questions without fear of sounding ignorant. There was an urgency in her that her co-workers didn't quite understand, but respected. And Brian watched, always from a distance without interfering. He walked through the hallways with the firm posture of someone in charge, but his eyes at times lingered on her. When it happened, it was brief, a second, 2, but long enough for him to notice something that intrigued him. She wasn't just learning, she was transforming. In a short time, Chloe had already mastered the company's internal systems, fixed simple bugs, organized server files, and even suggested improvements. Always with humility, always with precision. It was as if her brain had been starving and someone had finally put food on the table. She avoided direct contact with Brian, though she felt his gaze from time to time. Inside, she was still trying to understand why she had been chosen. Her gratitude was immense, but so was the constant fear. Could she handle it? Did she really belong in that world? That Friday, near the end of the day, Chloe was focused, reviewing a piece of code, when Stephanie, Brian's assistant, appeared beside her desk with an envelope in hand. "Management asked me to give you this." Chloe took the envelope carefully. It had the company's logo embossed on it. Inside, she found a permanent ID badge, an upgraded meal voucher, and a short typed note. "We recognize your dedication. Keep it up. Management." But it wasn't Stephanie's handwriting, and for some reason she couldn't explain. She knew it had been him. That night she came home exhausted but proud. She dropped her backpack to the floor, kicked off her shoes, and went to the kitchen to prepare something for her mother. Rose, as always, was in the armchair by the window listening to an AM radio station. "How was today?" she asked without turning. "Intense, but good. I got a permanent badge, Mom." "Is that important?" "It's like being made official. Like, I'm really there." Rose smiled softly. "And how do you feel?" Chloe took a while to respond, then said quietly, "Like I've been seen. For the first time." Hours later, after her mother had gone to sleep and the dishes were done, Chloe opened her bank email to check her balance. She did it every weekend. She didn't expect miracles. It was more of a survival habit than anything else. But something was different that night. The hospital debt. Gone. She blinked, refreshed the page, checked again. The amount, that number that had hung around her neck like an anchor, had been paid. In full. No installments, no negotiation, a single payment. Anonymous. Her heart raced. First she thought it was a system error, then maybe a donation from some organization. But no, There was no record of anything like that. Chloe stood frozen in front of the screen for minutes, her mouth dry, hands cold. Something inside her twisted, and then it hit her. It couldn't be him. But it was. The next day, with that confirmation burning in her veins, Chloe went to the company early. No one knew she was coming, but she knew she needed to see him, to look him in the eye. Brian was in his office, blazer draped over the chair, dress shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. When she entered, he looked up, and for a moment seemed genuinely glad to see her. "Chloe, are you okay?" She stepped in, closed the door firmly behind her, and approached. "You paid." He hesitated. "You paid all the hospital bills, without telling me, without asking. Why?" Brian took a deep breath. There was no arrogance in him, no rehearsed excuse. "Because I could." She narrowed her eyes, hurt. "You had no right. I just wanted to help." "Help with money? You think you can just invade someone's life like that, like you're solving a spreadsheet issue?" He stepped back, clearly thrown off. "I didn't mean to offend you." "But you did. Do you know why? Because you turned my fight into your favor, without looking me in the eye, without giving me a choice. And I wasn't raised to take charity." Brian swallowed hard. "I just thought it might give you some relief, let you breathe. And give you some sense of redemption," she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to breathe through debt. You've never had to choose between your mom's dinner and a light bill." He lowered his gaze. For the first time, he didn't answer. Chloe took a deep breath, fighting back tears, but her pride was louder. "I can't stay here. Not like this. Not with you paying for me like I'm some charity project." "That's not what this is," he murmured, "but that's how it feels, and that I can't accept." She took off her badge, placed it on the desk, and walked out before he could say another word. She didn't look back, didn't give herself time to regret it. Brian stood still for a long moment, then slowly sat down, staring at the badge on the desk. He thought he'd done the right thing, that he was being generous. But for the first time in a long time, he understood what it meant to cross a boundary that wasn't his to cross. And deep down, he knew he'd lost more than just an employee. In the elevator, Chloe pressed the buttons hard, her chest heaving, her heartbeat drowning out the sounds around her. When the doors opened, she crossed the lobby without looking at anyone, ignoring her co-workers' voices and curious glances. With every step, a wave of anger and frustration grew inside her. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about dignity, about control, about the right to fight with her own hands, no matter how hard it was. Outside, the cold wind stung her face like needles. She walked 2 blocks before realizing she was shaking. She didn't know if it was from the cold or from disappointment, maybe both. She stepped into a small cafe, one of those corner spots with wooden tables and the smell of fresh bread. Ordered a tea, sat in the corner, pulled her phone from her backpack and opened her banking app for the 5th time that day, just to be sure. It was there, all paid. The medical bills, the medication debt, even the overdue payment on her mother's wheelchair. All of it. "You turned my fight into your favor." The sentence echoed in her head like a hammer. She didn't know whether to cry or scream. Meanwhile, across the city, Brian sat in his office staring at the badge she'd left behind, like it was something he could never get back. Her words still rang in his ears, each syllable a mirror reflecting what he never wanted to see. Since he was young, he'd learned that problems were solved through action, and action, more often than not, came with money. That's how the world worked. That's how he had been trained to work. But Chloe was another world, one where every cent had a story, where every win came from endurance, not privilege. He saw that in her from the very beginning, and maybe he had fallen for that before he even understood it. But he hadn't known how to respect it, not the way he should have. He looked out the window. The city carried on unmoved by his personal drama, as distant as he now was from the only person who made him feel human again. Hours later, at home, Chloe sat next to her mother, who was listening to an audiobook with headphones. She told her everything, about the payment, the resignation, the confrontation. Rose stayed silent for a while. Then she took off the headphones and held her daughter's hand. "I know you're strong, Chloe, But sometimes, it also takes courage to accept when someone wants to give the best of what they have. And what if the best he thinks he has is money? Maybe that's all he's learned to offer, but that doesn't mean he doesn't feel things deeply. Chloe looked at her mother, eyes brimming. I just wanted to be hired for who I am, not for what he thinks he can fix. And you were. He hired you because you're good. But maybe now it's your turn to teach him that some wounds can't be fixed with a bank statement. He has to learn that on his own. Rose gently squeezed her hand. No one learns alone, not you, not him. That night, Chloe didn't play, didn't edit videos. She just lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling, thinking about all the things she wished she'd said, everything she'd heard, and the one thing that hurt the most, the part of her that missed him. Not the rich man, but the other one. The man who listened, who laughed sincerely, whose eyes grew heavy when he spoke of losing his parents. The man with whom, for a second, she believed a we might exist. Across the city, Brian was also lying down. The glass of whiskey still full on the table, his phone in his hand, no courage to type, no idea what to say. Because for the first time, he didn't want to fix it. He wanted to understand. He wanted to make it right. But he didn't know how. Not with money, not with apologies. He closed his eyes and allowed himself a thought he hadn't let in for a long time. Maybe I did everything wrong with the only person who really mattered. Her badge was still on the desk in his office. Brian hadn't filed it away, hadn't thrown it out. It stayed there, a reminder. A small hope that maybe somehow there was still a way back. But for now what remained was silence and absence. An absence he had caused himself. A light rain fell over Brooklyn that Saturday morning, tracing thin streams across the windows, as if the sky itself was trying to reorganize from within. Chloe was finishing folding clothes on the bed, while Rose, seated in her wheelchair, listened attentively as her daughter recounted the story of quitting her job. And that was it. I tossed the badge on the desk and walked out. I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but I did it. And how do you feel now? Rose asked, with the calmness of someone who's seen it all. Empty. Not just because of the job, because of him. I know it's stupid, but I miss him, Mom. Rose didn't say anything. She just looked at her daughter's face, so strong and so fragile at the same time. Across the city, Brian stood in front of his bedroom mirror. Black turtleneck shirt, tense expression. He considered not going. He'd thought about backing out 10 times that morning, but something inside him, something old, maybe forgotten, told him it was time to face the past. A past he couldn't keep ignoring. He went down to the garage, got in the car and typed the address into the GPS. It felt strange. He remembered the way, not by the buildings or the streets, but by the smell of food coming from the windows, the sound of children shouting in the hallways, the stairs that seemed to go on forever. A neighborhood he hadn't seen since he was 7, when he was pulled away from it without explanation. Brian parked in front of the building, simple, weather-worn, with dry plants hanging from makeshift balconies. He climbed slowly. He didn't want to startle anyone. He didn't want to mess it up again. He rang the bell with a knot in his stomach. Chloe opened the door, startled. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw who was there. Brian, soaked from the rain, without an umbrella, wearing an expression that blended hesitation and hope. What are you doing here? I needed to talk to you in person. No emails, no notes, no filters. Chloe hesitated but stepped aside. She opened the door without saying a word. He walked in. The apartment felt even smaller now with him inside. Brian took off his coat and looked around. He noticed the details, the photos in cheap frames, the medication boxes on the table, her mother's chair, the old glass window. And then she appeared. Rose. Her hair was whiter than he remembered, her face thinner, but the smile, it was the same. Calm, warm, familiar. Brian froze. So did she. For a moment, no sound. Not the cars outside. Not Chloe's footsteps. Just time folding in on itself, dragging up a memory he'd never been able to shake. Mrs. Rose, he said, almost in a whisper. She smiled. Brian. Chloe looked between them, confused. You two know each other. Rose extended her hand slowly. I was his nanny when he was little. Chloe's eyes widened. Brian stepped forward, slowly. He knelt in front of her, the way he used to when he wanted her to read him a story or teach him how to tie his shoes. I remember the day you left. I remember crying. I remember my mom saying you'd done something wrong, but I never believed her. Rose touched his face gently. Your mother fired me because I saved you. You were 5, almost drowned in the pool while she was on the phone. I jumped in, pulled you out. She was furious, said I embarrassed her, said no one could ever know. The words filled the room like shards of glass. Brian closed his eyes. A sob nearly escaped, but he held it back. He squeezed the woman's hand with reverence. I should have looked for you. I should have said this sooner. You were just a boy, and I moved on with my life, but I always wondered what happened to that little boy. Chloe was still trying to process everything. The man she yelled at in a parking lot, the CEO who hired her, the same boy her mother once cared for before everything fell apart. Brian stood. He looked at Chloe with eyes more human than she had ever seen. I invaded your space, and you were right to walk away. But now I understand why. You have something the world tried to make me forget, dignity, and I needed to see that up close. I needed to remember what it's like to be seen without fear, the way your mom saw me when I was just a lonely boy in a world too big. Chloe, speechless, simply nodded, her chest tight, her hands folded in front of her. Every part of her wanted to argue, to push back. But in that moment, there was something stronger than pride. There was truth. I didn't come to ask you to come back to work, Brian said. I came to say thank you for reminding me who I was and for showing me I can still be better. Rose smiled softly. God writes straight, but sometimes he needs brave people to hold the pen. The rain outside grew heavier, but inside, the silence was different now, the kind of silence that heals, that reconnects. Brian stepped toward the door. I'll leave you too. I don't want to push anything. I just wanted to remember and say thank you. But before he could leave, Chloe said, Wait. He stopped, turned slowly. Do you want some coffee? He smiled, a small, restrained smile, but real. I'd love some. Chloe set the kettle on the stove while Brian stood in the living room, looking at the old photos on the wall, crooked little frames filled with memories. One caught his eye. Chloe as a child, sitting in her mother's lap, both smiling in some random park. He stepped closer, touched the edge of the frame with his fingertip, as if the lost part of his childhood was sleeping there. That was before she lost her sight, Chloe said, returning with 2 mugs. She looks happy. It was our birthday picnic. We used to make cornbread and take it to the park. Even when we had almost nothing, she'd always find a reason to smile. Brian took the mug and sat down. The couch sank under his weight, and for the first time in a long while, he looked comfortable in a small space. Chloe watched him. There was still tension between them, the kind that happens when 2 people finally see each other clearly. No masks, no shields. But there was also a pause, a new space, the beginning of something. Why did you do it? She asked after a long silence. Pay your debts. She nodded. He stared into his mug, thoughtful. Because I admired you. Because I saw you walk into that interview with the same look I had when I lost my parents. Like you were carrying the world with one hand. And because it was the only way I knew how to do something. That's how I was raised. Solve, fix, pay. But I didn't think about how it might hurt you. Chloe sighed. The steam from the tea rose between them like a light curtain. My mom always says some people love in crooked ways, but that doesn't mean the love isn't real. It just needs to learn how to straighten itself out. I'm trying. Their eyes met. Brian was no longer just the CEO, or the man with the expensive car, or the rich kid. In that moment, he was simply someone trying to do the right thing. And that was enough. From the corner of the room, Rose said, her voice soft but steady. "You both carry too much on your backs. Maybe if you shared the weight, there'd be more room to walk lighter." Chloe smiled. Brian did too. She stood, took the mugs to the sink, and came back with a blanket in her hands. She tucked it gently over her mother's legs, adjusted the pillow behind her head. The gesture was simple, but Brian felt something twist in his chest. That's what he had always wanted. Someone who cared without asking, who stayed without needing to impress, someone who just stayed. "Are you going to be around long?" Chloe asked without looking at him. "As long as I need to be." "And after?" He gave a slow, unhurried smile. "After, I don't know, but for the first time I want to find out without trying to control everything." She turned to him, surprised by the answer. "That doesn't sound like something a CEO would say." "Maybe I'm learning to be less CEO and more human." She crossed her arms, leaned against the wall and looked at him for a few seconds. "I don't think there's room in my life for someone like you. What if I'm not trying to take up space? Just stay close?" Chloe bit the corner of her lip. Her mind spun, but her heart was starting to let light through the cracks. She knew it was too soon, that wounds were still raw, but she also knew that some encounters don't repeat. "I don't know where this is going, Brian, but..." The door's open. He nodded, grateful. "That's more than I hoped for." Outside, the rain had started to slow. The drops fell less frequently now, like the sky was taking a deep breath after a long cry. "I should get going," Brian said, picking up his coat. "Thanks for coming," Chloe replied, walking with him to the door. Before stepping out, he turned and looked at her, his eyes lighter now but still searching. "Chloe." "Yes." "You asked me why I paid for everything, but the truth is, I was just trying to pay back an old debt. One that can't be measured in money. Your mother saved my life when I was a child, literally. She pulled me out of that pool when no one else noticed, and she gave me love when no one else knew how to." Chloe felt a lump in her throat. "She told me today." "Then you understand I didn't come here to give you anything. I came to give something back." She nodded, her eyes watery. "Thank you for coming as a man, not a savior. Thank you for letting me in." He stepped out. Chloe closed the door slowly, leaned her back against it, and stood there for a while, feeling that something had shifted. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew something new had begun. And this time without masks. In the chair, Rose smiled silently. "I think the boy came home," she whispered. And Chloe, not fully knowing why, smiled too. In the days that followed, Brian began visiting Chloe's apartment more often. He never showed up unannounced, always sent a message first, respectful. Sometimes he brought flowers for Rose. Other times something simple, a coffee, an apple pie, a pack of cookies. Nothing expensive, nothing extravagant, just presence. Chloe watched it all closely. She still didn't know exactly how to feel. She was hurt but couldn't deny the effect he had when he was around. Somehow he made things feel lighter, made the routine less heavy. And he never pushed. He'd sit on the couch, listen, ask about her mother, about the games she used to play, about what she was reading. He truly wanted to know. And that, more than anything else, got to her. During the day, Chloe went back to making deliveries. She needed to supplement the income, keep the bills paid. The money from H-Tech had helped for a while, but now it was real life again. The difference was, this time, she didn't feel alone. One afternoon, while biking through the narrow streets of Park Slope, she got a call from Brian. "I need a favor," he said, straight to the point. "That doesn't sound like a request. Sounds like a summons. There's a weird bug in the company system. No one's been able to fix it. I thought maybe you could take a look. You want me to come back? I want your help, that's all." She hesitated but agreed. When she arrived at H-Tech, the weight of memories hit her chest. The cafeteria where she'd eaten alone, the hallway where she'd found the yellow post-it on her monitor, the office where she had faced Brian, burning with emotion. But now it felt different. He greeted her with a subtle smile, his eyes calm. "You didn't have to come in person," she said. You trust machines more than people, he teased, and she laughed despite herself. Brian led her to the tech room. He showed her the issue. Chloe stepped closer, analyzed the code, and within minutes identified the problem. You were using the wrong key in the cache. It was creating a loop during startup. Are you speaking Greek? Only when I haven't slept. He smiled. And in that moment, she noticed something different about him. Less tension, less rigidity. Like he was finally allowing himself to be who he was, without the weight of perfection. Seriously, Chloe, this would have taken down the entire system in 2 weeks. Then it's a good thing I came. It's a great thing you're here. She looked away but smiled. In the following days, Brian called her back several times, sometimes to fix minor problems, other times just to talk. Little by little, her resistance melted away. Not because he insisted, but because he waited. They walked through the neighborhood after work, sometimes to the market, other times just aimlessly. They talked about everything: childhood, pain, fears. Time did its quiet work. It didn't erase, but it made space for something new to grow. During one of those walks, Chloe said, "I feel torn." Why? Because part of me still thinks this is impossible, that you and I can't really work. He stopped walking. Because of the money? Because of everything. The difference. The past. What people will say. What you represent. And what I represent. Chloe, I don't want you to change to fit into my life. I want to build something that fits both of us. She looked at him silently. And there, on that simple sidewalk, under the dim light of a street lamp, something inside her gave way. I don't know if I can trust again. Then let me try every day, until you can. That was it. No promises, no plans, just presence. At the company, Stephanie noticed that Brian had changed. He was more engaged, more attentive to the team. In one meeting, he interrupted to highlight a solution Chloe had proposed, even though she wasn't officially employed anymore. The idea came from a model Ramirez used weeks ago, he said to the board. We owe this progress to her. Stephanie looked at him surprised and impressed. The following week, Brian offered Chloe a new position, official, with benefits, flexible hours, full freedom in her technical role. She hesitated. I don't want this out of charity. And it's not. It's because you've earned it. She accepted. That night, heading home with the new contract in hand, Chloe climbed the 3 flights of stairs with a different kind of weight in her chest. She walked in, dropped her backpack, and ran to her mother's armchair. Mum, I'm back. Rose smiled gently. And him? He waited for me. Then maybe he deserves for you to wait for him too. Chloe didn't respond. She just hugged her mother tightly. Meanwhile, in his quiet penthouse, Brian looked out at the sky from the balcony. The signed contract was still on the table. Beside it, a framed photo he'd had digitized, an old picture, him as a small boy in Rose's lap, smiling without fear. Now it all made sense. With the new contract signed, Chloe returned to the routine with a different posture. She now had a small but functional office within HTech's development department. The team that had once kept their distance now treated her with respect. Not because of Brian, but because of what she showed in action: efficiency, focus, and an intelligence that didn't need to shout to be seen. She came up with simple solutions for problems others overcomplicated. She navigated code like it was a personal puzzle, and even with her professional demeanor, she never lost that quiet strength, that raw honesty, and the sense of justice Brian had always admired. Outside of work, Brian's visits to Chloe's home continued. He'd stop by in the late afternoon after work, sometimes briefly, other times staying into the evening. Slowly, he became part of the routine. He and Rose developed a kind of quiet friendship. He brought sweets. She made tea. They talked about everyday things, but always with warmth. A connection that didn't need explanations. She looked at him like she already knew, and he accepted that look as an unspoken blessing. One night after dinner, Brian found Chloe sitting on the bedroom floor with her laptop on her lap, gaming. The glow of the screen lit her face, and she didn't see him come in. You still play? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. She paused the game, glanced at him and smirked. I play so I don't lose it. Still works better than therapy. He laughed. Can I watch? Only if you don't ask dumb questions. Like what? Why didn't you jump that wall? Or why is your character dying? Fair. He sat beside her, crossing his legs like a teenager. Watched the game for a few minutes, then looked at her sideways. Have you ever thought about creating your own? Chloe kept her eyes on the screen. I have. I've got a few sketches, but never had the time or the tools. What if I helped you with that? She paused the game again. Brian, not as a CEO, as a partner, you've got great ideas and a unique vision. H-Tech has the structure. We could make it happen. She took a deep breath, then set the laptop on the floor and looked him in the eyes. Do you realize how everything about you revolves around offering help, even when it's not needed? He lowered his head, embarrassed. Sorry, that wasn't my intention. I know, but sometimes just sitting here beside me is enough. They looked at each other for a long moment and didn't need to say anything more. Days later, Brian invited her to sit in on a meeting with the product team. Nothing formal. Just to get her opinion on a new interface, she went, spoke little, but enough for everyone to realize she had a strategic mind. After the meeting, one of the developers approached her. Ever thought about leading a squad? Chloe swallowed hard. I'm still getting used to things. Well, if you ever want to, let us know. It'd be great to have someone grounded in charge. She walked out with her face warm. For the first time, she didn't feel like just a survivor. She felt like someone who could actually build something. That evening, after routine medical visits with Rose, Chloe took her mother for ice cream at the old neighborhood park. Brian showed up, surprised to find them there in such a simple moment. I didn't know you came here. We used to when I was a kid, Chloe said, offering her mom a spoonful of ice cream, before diabetes stole everything. Rose laughed. Not everything. I still have the two of you. And between us, stolen ice cream tastes better. They sat together on a wooden bench. Children ran around. The sky darkened slowly. The breeze carried the smell of popcorn. Brian pulled a small envelope from his pocket. It's just a draft, he said, handing it to Chloe. Some early ideas for that game. If you want, we can sketch it out together. She opened it. Inside were printed pages with name ideas, level structure, character concepts. But what caught her eye was the dedication at the top. Inspired by someone who plays to live, not to escape. She smiled. You play dirty, Holt. I only play that way with people who are worth it. She tucked the envelope away carefully. Let's see if you can handle losing. He looked at her playfully. If it's to you, I might even let it happen. Chloe laughed. A light, real laugh, one she hadn't let out in a long time. Rose watched them with a sparkle in her eyes. There was something there. Something growing slowly, without promises but with roots. Later on the walk back home, Chloe said, her voice low, I'm still scared of what this could become, of what could break. Then let's take it slow. No plans, no pressure, just living. She nodded. And if it works, then we play the next level together. And they kept walking down the narrow sidewalk. Two worlds that, against all odds, were beginning to find room in each other. Life doesn't come with a pause button, but in that moment, neither of them wanted to stop. The invitation came on a Monday afternoon by text message. If it's not too weird, have dinner with me. Chloe stared at her phone for long seconds. She was sitting in the company cafeteria, her lunchbox open on her lap. She made a face at the dry chicken and turned her attention back to the screen. It wasn't a job offer, or a meeting disguised as something casual. It was a direct request. Simple. Dinner. She thought about it for a few minutes, not because she didn't want to go, but because she knew what that dinner might mean. Then she replied, Sure, but pick somewhere I don't have to wear heels. The answer came with a laughing emoji and an address in Park Slope, a small restaurant with low lighting and the smell of fresh basil, a place Brian went in the rare moments he wanted to disappear from the world. On the night of the dinner, Chloe wore a navy blue blouse and a pair of black pants that fit a little snugly, but still worked. She tied her hair into a loose bun, applied a thin line of eyeliner, and took a deep breath before leaving home. When she arrived, he was already there, grey shirt with the sleeves rolled up, clean-shaven, that same observant look, only softer. "I thought you might bail," he said, standing up. Almost did, but the idea of eating something other than instant noodles won. Brian laughed and pulled out her chair. "You'll like this place. They have a spinach lasagna that makes you forget your bills." "That's a tall order, but I'm willing to try." The waiter brought water and menus. They ordered without rush, then fell into silence for a few seconds. But it wasn't awkward. It was as if they were adjusting to each other in a new setting. No source code, no spreadsheets, no deliveries. Just them. "You know what's strange?" Chloe said, breaking the ice. "Being here with you and not feeling like I'm walking through a minefield. What were you expecting? That it'd be weird, that we wouldn't have anything to talk about, but it's like, this makes sense." "It does. To me, it does." She looked at him, serious. "But I'm still scared." "Of what?" "Of losing myself in this, of losing control, of letting you in and then not knowing how to handle it if everything falls apart." "What if I told you I'm scared too?" "You?" "I was taught to hide it. But yes, I'm scared of how I feel, of what I can't say, of messing everything up again." Chloe nodded slowly. "The difference is, you can pay to fix things. Accept other people's hearts." Dinner arrived, steaming lasagna, garlic bread, 2 glasses of wine. They ate slowly. The conversation lightened. They talked about childhood, or the lack of one. Chloe shared about the father who disappeared when she was 9. Brian talked about the grandmother who raised him after the plane crash, but never learned to say, "I love you." "I think we were raised in survival mode," she said, "and now we're trying to live in connection mode. I'm not even sure I know what that is." "Me neither, but we could learn together." She smiled. It was the first time she'd felt anything close to peace beside someone, not that impulsive, instant thrill, but the feeling of solid ground. As they left the restaurant, Brian insisted on walking her home. "You don't have to, Brian. I'm used to walking alone." "I know, but let me walk with you this time." She agreed. They walked side by side down quiet streets lit by old lampposts. The breeze was gentle. The sidewalks were covered with dry leaves. "Do you think we're moving too fast?" Chloe asked after a while. "I think we're going at the right pace. Ours. And if things change, they will change. Things always do. But what doesn't change is the choice to keep going even when it's hard." She looked at him, and for the first time she didn't feel small. They reached her building. Brian hesitated at the door. "Can I come up?" "Not tonight." "That's okay. But thank you for the dinner, for listening, for the calm." He smiled. "Good night, Chloe." "Good night, Brian." He turned and started walking back. She stood there watching him go. And in that moment, her phone vibrated. Call from the hospital. "Hello?" "This is the ER. Ms. Rose Ramirez was just admitted. We need someone to come immediately." Chloe didn't think. She just ran. The hospital had that sterile, impersonal smell she knew too well. The cold lights, the distant beeping of monitors, nurses' hurried footsteps in the hallways. When she arrived at the front desk, breathless, the receptionist recognized her immediately. Ms. Ramirez was brought to the observation wing. Her blood pressure was very low and she was confused. "The doctor is with her now." Chloe nodded, unable to speak. Her legs were shaking. Her throat burned with dryness. The fear was physical, hot, cruel. She knew this day would come, but no one is ever ready when it actually does. She sat on one of the hard plastic chairs in the hallway and buried her face in her hands. She breathed with difficulty, fought off panic. Her entire body felt out of place. Minutes later, or maybe hours, she couldn't say, someone sat next to her. A familiar scent, a presence she hadn't expected to see so quickly. It was Brian. "I saw you running. It looked off, so I followed." She slowly lifted her face. He was there, Shirt wrinkled, hair tousled, eyes worried. "She's in there," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "They won't tell me anything yet." "Then we'll wait. Together." She didn't reply, but she didn't pull her hand away when he took it either. They sat there in silence for over an hour. Every time a nurse walked by, she lifted half an inch off her seat. Every voice in the distance made her eyes search for answers. When the doctor finally came out, Chloe jumped to her feet. "Doctor?" "Chloe, right? Your mother is stable now. It was a sudden drop in blood pressure. Her condition is delicate. We'll need to observe her for at least 48 hours, maybe more." "Can I see her? Just for a few minutes. She's resting but conscious." Chloe nodded and headed to the room. Inside, Rose was pale, hooked up to IVs, her eyes barely open, but alive, breathing. "Hi, Mom," Chloe said, approaching the bed. "It's okay, I'm here." Rose squeezed her hand lightly, tried to smile, but exhaustion weighed more. "Brian, is he here?" she whispered, barely audible. "He is. He's outside." "Let him in, please." Chloe hesitated, but nodded. She stepped out and gave a small nod. Brian stood and walked into the room slowly, reverently. He approached the bed like someone stepping onto sacred ground. "Ms. Ramirez, still just Rose, and I'm still your nanny," she said, weak but firm. He laughed, emotional. "That's true." Rose reached out and touched his hand. "Brian, I know what you're feeling. The loneliness, the ache, the fear of losing again. I didn't want to get close and hurt anyone. But you didn't. You brought light to my daughter, even if you didn't know how. And now, I need you to promise me something." He leaned closer. "I promise. Take care of her, even when she says she doesn't need it, even when she pushes you away, even when she wants to do it all alone. Take care of her, with what you have, with who you are." His eyes welled up, but he held steady. "I will, always." Rose closed her eyes, exhausted, a faint smile still on her lips. Chloe watched from the doorway, and in that moment, something shifted inside her, as if everything that had been fear was now just truth. Later, after the visit, they returned to the waiting room. Chloe sat beside Brian in silence. Words didn't come yet, but her gesture spoke louder. She rested her head on his shoulder, like someone finally allowing themselves to rest. He said nothing. He just let her. They stayed there for hours, she, eyes closed, he, alert to every sound. No rush, no expectations, just presence. And when midnight fell over the city, Brian was still there, standing beside her, like someone who had chosen to stay. The hospital woke early. By 5 in the morning, nurses were already moving through the corridors with brisk steps, adjusting machines, checking charts. Chloe, however, had been awake long before that. Sitting in one of the vinyl chairs beside her mother's bed, she watched the quiet stirrings of the morning with her eyes fixed on the floor. Rose was sleeping, her chest rising and falling slowly, though weakened. Her face was thinner, her fingers more fragile. Still, there was peace there, a peace that hurt, because Chloe knew. Brian appeared with 2 coffees and a poorly wrapped croissant. He set everything down on the small bedside table without making a sound. He had been there since the night before, slept only a little in one of the hallway chairs, but he never complained. Chloe looked at him with silent gratitude. She didn't say anything, just grabbed the coffee and took a sip. "Thank you," she murmured. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do, because I've never had someone to share this with." "Well, now you do." They sat in silence until Rose's faint voice broke through the quiet. "Chloe," she immediately leaned closer. "I'm here, Mom. Help me sit up." Carefully, Brian supported one of her arms while Chloe adjusted the pillows. When they finally got her upright, Rose sighed with relief. "Much better. Now I can see you both better," she joked, even though she hadn't seen in years. Chloe held her hand. "Do you want anything?" "Yes. I want you two to stop walking in circles." Chloe frowned. "Mom, I'm blind, not stupid. I know there's something between you two. and I want to see it grow. But before that, I need to ask you something." Brian stepped closer, respectful. "Anything you want, Ms. Rose." She took a few seconds. It seemed she was gathering breath, not just in her body, but in her soul. "Take care of each other. Promise me, because I'm leaving." Chloe shut her eyes, her throat tightening. "Mom." "Shh." Rose cut her off with a weak smile. "I'm tired, sweetheart, but at peace because I've seen it. With what's left of my sight, you're safe now. And he—" She reached out toward Brian, who took her hand firmly. "He still has the soul of the little boy I cared for. He just needed to remember." Brian swallowed hard, but didn't speak. He just bowed his head like someone receiving a blessing. Chloe rested her forehead against her mother's hand. They stayed like that for several minutes. 3 lives bound together in a cold hospital room, no luxury, no audience. Just the raw truth of what really matters. Hours later, Rose fell asleep again, and this time, the sleep was deeper. The monitors beeped steadily as if announcing that time was slipping away. Brian and Chloe returned to the waiting room. She sat down, her shoulders heavy, her eyes fixed on a random spot on the wall. "I don't know what to do now." "You don't have to know. Just we should breathe. I'm here." She looked at him, and even with the world falling apart, something inside her remained whole. "I always thought I'd go through this alone. And I always thought no one would ever truly want me." She touched his hand softly. "Maybe that's why we found each other." The doctor appeared near the end of the afternoon. He walked slowly, his expression tired. "Chloe, your mother asked to see you, and Brian, together." They stood immediately. In the room, Rose was awake but paler than ever, her eyes half closed, her breathing short. "Listen to me," she said, her voice faint. "Don't wait for your lives to start after I'm gone. They've already started. All you need is the courage to keep going." Chloe held one of her hands, Brian the other. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. More than words can ever say." She slowly turned her head toward Brian. "And you were my boy. And now you're the man I hoped you'd become. Promise me you'll make her your priority. Always." Brian squeezed her hand. "I promise." She smiled. A small, almost childlike smile. "Then I can rest now." It was the last thing she said. The machine let out a continuous tone minutes later. The room filled with a strange stillness, and in that stillness Chloe cried, quietly, without desperation, like someone who understood this wasn't the end, just a transition. Brian said nothing. He just held her, supported her, breathed with her. The farewell took place 2 days later. A simple service, a few people, just close neighbors, old friends from church, and some co-workers from H-Tech who had only recently met Chloe but admired her. Brian took care of everything, but without overstepping, without taking up space. After the burial, Chloe sat alone on the apartment balcony, the same place where, years ago, she helped her mother tend to the dry, potted plants. The world felt quieter now, but she wasn't alone. Brian joined her and sat beside her. He didn't say anything, just placed his hand over hers. And there they stayed. 2 orphans, different in background and story, but now connected by something stronger than grief, the choice to stay. The silence of that night felt different, not empty, full of absence. After the funeral, Chloe didn't want to see anyone. She spent hours locked in her mother's room, lying on the bed. She held the pillow like it might still carry a trace of her scent. The apartment, though small, now felt enormous, too empty. The walls echoed in a way they hadn't before. It was as if the world was waiting for her to make a choice, move forward or hide. Brian, out of respect, kept his distance for the first day. He was the one who closed the apartment, sorted out paperwork with the funeral home, contacted H-Tech to request temporary leave for Chloe. All of it quietly, carefully, not replacing her, just filling the space she couldn't carry yet. On the 3rd day, near the end of the afternoon, Chloe appeared at Brian's office door. He was alone, sleeves rolled up, no tie, reviewing a technical report on his computer. When he looked up and saw her there, he stopped everything. She walked in slowly, her eyes still red but steady. "I'm not here to talk about work," she said. "I know." She walked to him without taking off her backpack. She wore the same black blouse from the funeral. Her hair was tied up messily. "I came because I needed a place where my head wouldn't be crushed by memories." Brian stood. "This place will always be yours." She took a deep breath, her eyes filling again. "My mom loved you. I don't know if you noticed, but sometimes she trusted you more than she trusted me. I noticed, and I won't let that die with her." Chloe walked up to him, and without saying a word, hugged him. It wasn't a hug of comfort or impulse. It was the kind of hug that carries everything words can't hold. A gesture of surrender, of acceptance, of release. Brian wrapped his arms around her, resting his chin on her head. "I'm here, Chloe. For real." "I know. That's why I came back." They stayed like that for a long time. The world outside kept turning, honking horns, meetings, deadlines. But in that office, time paused. Later that night, Chloe returned home with Brian. But for the first time, pain wasn't her only companion. Brian walked beside her, carrying 2 grocery bags. She, her face still marked by grief, held the key as if opening the door to something new. Inside the apartment, everything was the same. Her mother's medications in the kitchen, the armchair with the folded blanket, the dry plants on the balcony. But the air felt different, because now it wasn't just absence, it was a beginning. Brian placed the bags on the table and started putting things away without asking. Chloe just watched. She sat on the couch, let her eyes travel across the room, took a deep breath. "Would you mind if I changed a few things here?" She looked at him, surprised. "Like what?" "Nothing drastic, just clearing out expired stuff, replacing old cloths, opening windows, refreshing what needs to be refreshed." Chloe was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "That's fine, but go slow. Nothing radical." "Slow," he repeated. "I promise." Later, after a quick dinner, they sat on the balcony, the same place where, just days ago, she had sat silently with her mother. Brian watched the city lights, the muffled sounds of traffic below. "She left so much of herself here," he said. "She was the foundation. I only learned to walk because she held me up the whole time, even when she seemed too weak." "You're not alone now." She rested her head on his shoulder. "I know." The phone rang. It was Stephanie from H-Tech, asking if she wanted to postpone her return. "Tell her I'll be there Monday," Chloe replied firmly. Brian looked at her, surprised. "You sure?" "My mom always said, life doesn't wait for us to fix our souls before moving on. So I'm going, messy and all." He smiled, proud, moved. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met." She shrugged. "It's not strength, it's survival. But now, I think I might finally start living." The clock was close to midnight. The city was winding down. And in a small apartment scented with coffee and longing, 2 hearts beat in quiet sync. No vows, no certainties, just a silent promise to keep going for each other. And that was enough. Months had passed. Autumn arrived, bringing dry leaves, colder mornings, and golden afternoons. Life moved on, as it always does. But inside the small Brooklyn apartment, everything seemed to have changed, without hurry, without fanfare, like the seasons slowly reshaping the landscape without asking permission. Chloe was now working full-time at H-Tech, leading a small game development team. She was respected, heard, admired, not because she was the CEO's girlfriend, as some had whispered early on, but because she proved day after day that her mind was as sharp as her will. With every line of code, she rebuilt more than systems. She rebuilt herself. Brian, in turn, was no longer the man he used to be. He was still CEO, still the strong name behind the company. But now, his eyes held less tension. His urgency had given way to presence. He had learned to pause, to listen, to see what really matters. And more than anything, he had learned that vulnerability is not weakness. It's the way forward. They never made their relationship public. There was no need. Anyone who saw them together, walking through the halls of the company, sharing a snack on a park bench, just knew. And those who didn't see it, didn't need to. Chloe's apartment was now Brian's home too. No Manhattan penthouse, no designer furniture. He chose to stay there, with her mother's memories, with the peeling wall he'd spent an entire Saturday painting, ruining a college shirt in the process. In the corner of the living room, a new photo frame held an old picture, Rose smiling, with little Chloe on her lap. Beside it, a more recent photo, Brian and Chloe on the balcony, holding coffee mugs, laughing at a joke neither of them could remember. That Friday night, the house was quiet. Chloe stepped out of the shower wearing an oversized t-shirt, her wet hair wrapped in a towel. Brian was in the kitchen, finishing heating up the pizza he'd picked up on the way home. The TV was on, low volume, playing some random documentary. "Want soda or wine?" he asked. "If you have both, mix them." "Chloe, just kidding." She laughed and settled onto the couch, grabbing one of the game controllers from the makeshift shelf. The same old laptop she had started her channel on was still there, now used mostly for editing and for nostalgia. Brian brought the plates over and sat beside her. They looked at home, because they were. But it was more than that. It was the kind of intimacy that didn't require ceremony, a comfortable silence, a connection that demanded nothing but presence. "Wanna play?" she asked, already powering on the console. "You're gonna destroy me again?" "Only if you mess up badly." "Great. Prepare to be crushed." The screen lit up. The game began. Chloe played with ease. Brian, focused, tried to keep up. Occasionally they nudged each other with elbows, laughed, teased, shared the space like two teenagers rediscovering the world. During a break, Brian looked at her. "You know I mentally quit the day you threw that controller on the floor?" She laughed out loud. "What do you mean?" "I didn't want that world anymore, not like that. But you walked into my life like a bug that exposes the whole system, and I finally saw what was wrong." "What was wrong?" "Me." Chloe looked at him tenderly. "And now?" "Now I keep trying to fix the code one day at a time." She leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder. The game was on pause. Life wasn't. "I didn't expect any of this, Brian. When I yelled at you in that parking lot, I thought you were just another arrogant guy taking the place of someone who needed it more. And I was. But you pulled me out of that place. Literally." She laughed. "Hard to believe it all started with a scream and a handicapped parking spot. It started with a woman who had everything against her and still never looked down." Chloe closed her eyes for a second, then stood up, walked to the shelf, and took out a small package wrapped in plain paper. She handed it to him. "What's this?" "Open it." Brian opened it carefully. Inside was a keychain shaped like a video game controller. Simple, rubber. But on the back, engraved in small letters, "Keep playing." He read it, smiled. "Is this a request?" "It's a choice." He pulled her in by the waist and brought her back to sit beside him. The game still on pause, life never. "I choose you, Chloe, and I'll keep playing, even when the game gets hard." She looked into his eyes. "Then we're on the same team." They kissed right there, unhurried, like people who knew the world could wait, and because they'd finally found a safe place, a place where they didn't need to win, only stay. On the screen, the game flickered. Press start to continue, and that's exactly what they did. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.